are just 10 seconds.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. We're gonna try to get through the show tonight. I've had a cold. You can probably tell from my raspy voice a little bit, but everybody, welcome. Hope you're all doing well. I am Silentkaster, your host, and I am back on the main computer. What a joy that is, actually. I'm really happy to be back on the main computer because I was working off the laptop for the longest time. And, I've gotten this all set up. And so I think I'm in a good spot for this. So I'm happy to be finally having my two screens available again instead of having to cycle through each one. I can actually look at your comments live, and hopefully the show will be a little bit better for y'all. Anyway, welcome everybody. I wanted to start off with a little bit of poll analysis here. I know we did this last week, and some things have changed though a little bit since the last time we've talked about it. There have been a few changes, so let's dive into the polling. Now, what we see for Trump and the Republican nomination is about the same. What we see is Trump kind of way out in front at 54, But if you look at where DeSantis is, and on this one he's at 18, he's actually, it looks like he's starting to trend down a little bit. So he was polling, around 20. And he's getting to, we're seeing 15, 16, 13. In South Carolina, he's actually in third place behind Haley. And granted, Haley was a popular governor of South Carolina. Now, it does look like, Trump is still way out front. He's still the heavy favorite. But one thing that's a little interesting is my favorite candidate, Ramaswamy, is gaining a little bit of steam. So we see him at 6, 5, whereas before he was polling at like 1 and 2. So, he's 3 here, but 6 here, 3 here. So 10 here. He's gaining some momentum. And I still think it's a foregone conclusion that Trump will probably end up being the nominee. I will not vote for him, at least not right now. But, I would probably just write in whoever the Libertarian candidate is, or write in, somebody else. But probably not going to vote for him if he is the nominee. As I've mentioned, his last year in office was abysmal. And I understand it was COVID and everything, but still, he does seem to be the overwhelming favorite for the Republicans. And we're going to talk a little bit about Republican strategy in a bit here after we get through the polls. There's a few more things I want to take a look at before we jump to that. But Republicans are not good at strategy. They never have been. They never will be. And some of it is probably a little bit of what we would call self-sacrifice, I guess. But the whole thing is they're just not strategists. They never have been. And I think they're going to be making a mistake pretty soon that's going to kind of seal the deal for 2024. I've been predicting a long time that I don't think Republicans are going to win in 2024. I think that most people are going to default to Biden, especially if Trump's at the top of the ticket. We look at how he did in 2022. And you have to remember, even though Republicans took the House in 2022, it was well within grasp to take the House by a gigantic margin, okay? 40, 50 seats, some people were predicting, okay? And you barely squeezed out 5 seats, I think. And then what happened in the Senate? They actually lost a seat, right? And this is on top of a president that is so unpopular that, like I said, he's at 54, but he's been there for a long time. He's at 54 disapproval, as we mentioned last time, but he's been there a long time. Maybe not at 54, but at least at 50, right? And then, his approval has been upside down for a long time. So, who did people vote or see at the top of the ticket for the Republican Party? Well, that was Trump. And you had a lot of really terrible candidates. And what you had was Herschel Walker, for instance. Terrible candidate. Had no business running for the Senate. He was up against... excuse me, as I said, I'm getting over a cold still, so you're going to have a few coughs. Hopefully a sneeze, but a few coughs. But he was up against Raphael Warnock. And they pulled every trick in the book they could to get Herschel Walker over the finish line in Georgia, which is, which handily elected a Republican governor, right? And still has a red House and Senate majority. And yet, you got Raphael Warnock that came out of there with a victory. And, Herschel Walker was very, what I would say, I feel like he was incredibly disingenuous with the Jesus stuff, right? So what he was doing was a lot of, the religion, like trying to shore up the religious right base, which is strong in Georgia, but it's just not enough. It's just not enough, and a lot of independents will get turned off by that. And so, you can't. The thing is you have Trump supporting you, who is not a Jesus type, right? He's definitely very much the kind of counterbalance to that. Like, he appealed, like, if we remember, Trump did really well in the primaries against Ted Cruz, in the kind of the urban states, New York, California, those kind of states. And that's where Trump was doing well back then. But, there was Herschel Walker, there was another one that always comes to the top of my mind, and of course I'm not thinking of it right now because it was, back then, but, the only reason that the Republicans barely took the House, really, was because of New York and Florida, because you had great people at the top of the tickets. I mean, Lee Zeldin almost took over New York, which is unheard of. Yeah, Dr. Oz. Dr. Oz is the other one. Terrible, terrible, terrible candidate. And the thing about him is that the strategy for him was also very bad. Fetterman, when you have the focus on Fetterman, the Republicans tried so hard to knock Fetterman off of his stool, and what they neglected to do was say, why should you vote for Oz, right? So the thing is that you have to understand that in a, it's not enough to get lower turnout for the Democrats. So that's one piece of the strategy, is you want to have low turnout. Republicans win more often in a low turnout type of election, which is part of the reason that Zeldin almost won in New York, right? Because a lot of people were not excited about Kathy Hochul. Like, a lot of people actually, for better or worse, liked Cuomo. They did not like Kathy Hochul. There was no, she was the incumbent, but she was an incumbent because Cuomo, basically resigned. So, Zeldin was actually a good candidate, and so you had lower turnout among Democrats, and you had higher turnout among Republicans. And that's why New York had a bunch of seats that, went to the Republicans in the House. But the other reason is because you never heard any reason, but for Pennsylvania, you never heard any reasons to vote for Oz, right? I never heard any reasons to vote for Oz. I remember that debate where, Fetterman started off, hello, everyone, good night, he started that way, and I never, ever, ever heard a soundbite from Dr. Oz on any of the podcasts I listened to, whether it be, somebody that leans what we would call left. Again, I don't like saying left and right in American politics because it's all left. And, but whether you kind of have someone that quote-unquote leans right or quote-unquote leans left, all I heard about was Fetterman. I never heard about Oz. And so you gotta give people a reason to vote for Oz, because there's going to be a lot of people that just don't vote, right? They're just like, well, I don't like either of these candidates, so I'm just not going to vote. And so Republicans have to realize that they're not entitled to votes just because one side isn't going to get the votes that they normally would get, right? And unfortunately, I think that's kind of a strategy of Ronna McDaniel. I think she's just bad at strategy in the RNC, but anyway. Let's also talk a little bit about the steady disapproval for Biden. I mean, obviously we're still seeing 54. That's probably going to remain the same for a long time. That disapproval is not going to really change, I don't think. It doesn't mean that 54% of the country, are not going to vote for Biden, right? A lot of those people that disapprove of him are still going to vote for him. Because they're going to look at Trump or whoever the nominee is, most likely Trump, and they're going to say, I don't like him either. So you always have to remember that. So yeah, we just have Biden sitting at around that disapproval. And what I think could save Biden are the Republicans, because they're so bad at strategy. I cannot even with the Republicans, guys. I can't even. This is the thing. We're going to talk a little bit about this little interview with Kevin McCarthy and Sean Hannity, our favorite brown noser. So, House Speaker Kevin McCarthy on Monday told Fox News host Sean Hannity that the investigations into the Biden family business dealings are rising to the level of an impeachment inquiry. McCarthy asked why Biden took money from countries with real challenges and not friendly countries like France or the UK. When President Biden was... This is McCarthy talking. When President Biden was running for office, he told the American public that he has never talked about business. He said his family has never received $1 from China, which we now prove is not true. We now have some of the most credible whistleblowers. These tenured IRS agents who have come forward said that the Biden family has been treated differently, that what Weiss has told us has been different than what Garland and Weiss has told the public. And you're sitting here where now you have found millions of foreign money, just what the 1023 alleges they did to Biden's family. Now we found that it is funneled through shell companies. For those of you that are international, what we call a shell company is a company that is actually kind of another company in name, right? So, like TikTok is owned by ByteDance, and what the response has been, if ByteDance were to be dispersed, is that China would probably set up TikTok through what they call a shell company, right? So, kind of just a holding that they have, that controls TikTok, but is actually technically tied to that's the kind of thing that a shell company is. It's just a company that exists, that really exists just for tax purposes, and actually is fronted by another company. So, if you're sitting in our position today, we would know none of this if Republicans had not taken the majority. Barely. We only followed where the information has taken us, but this is rising to the level of impeachment inquiry, which provides Congress the strongest power to get the rest of the knowledge and information needed. Because this president has also used something we have not seen since Richard Nixon. He used the weaponization of government to benefit his family and deny Congress the ability to have the oversight. Okay. Let's talk about impeachment real quick, guys. The Republicans, if they impeach Biden, it's going to have the same effect as the Trump indictments have had for Trump, which is to garner support behind him. Okay? Everybody, I don't think there's a person in the world, okay, knows that if the Republicans went forward with impeachment, let's just say by some miracle, that they got through the impeachment, right? Because I'm not of the opinion that all the Republicans will hold rank, okay, for an impeachment. I'm just not. I'm pretty sure McCarthy probably knows that too, but I am not of the opinion that all of the Republicans will hold rank for an impeachment. If McCarthy holds an impeachment inquiry and it fails, okay, meaning that some of the Republicans defect, none of the Democrats are going to defect. None of them. But even, 10 of them defect, it's over. The Republicans get charged correctly with a being partisan in an impeachment hearing, right? Now, let's say, and that's kind of revealing. I understand that we know that, like the people that are listening to this channel and the people that are listening to this podcast probably know that, but a lot of people don't know that, okay? So they don't know, or at least they don't recognize, or they've forgotten that it would be a, partisan hearing. And you don't need that many people to have their eyes opened to that in order for it to affect an election or anything like that, right? The reason I say that is because, the Republicans win generally by pretty thin margins, whereas Democrats, in places that they need to win, and Democrats tend to win by larger margins because that means that they have higher turnout, right? So if they have Republicans winning by small margins, you don't need to convince that many people not to vote for you in order for the Democrats to win. As I kind of mentioned, because of the Democrat turnout, Democrats kind of have a default as far as winning the elections, right? They have public schools, they have the young people, they have the advantage of people that you have an advantage of older people being able to vote on election day, but now that Democrats have kind of turned that into basically you can vote for weeks before an election now. Well, Republicans don't really have that advantage anymore. So now what it is it's, Democrats have the only benefit that they have, or the only benefit that Republicans have, is that most of Republicans will go and vote. And so now that it's easier to vote, for a lot of people that are working, that otherwise might be working on election day or whatever, they'll just swing by and actually do that, right? They'll just do that, whereas the Republicans will not. Tends to have narrative control through censorship. Republicans don't. They definitely have narrative control. I do think that there are outlets, for Republicans and whatnot. And most of the people that want to know where they are will be able to find them. The thing is that Democrats, and this is kind of a different topic that I'll probably get into a different day, but Democrats have the narrative control of forced speech, meaning that a lot of people will not say what they really think, or they'll flower their language, in order to be, politically correct, or, not lose their job. They won't say what they really think, and that is unfortunately, just people lying because they're afraid of consequences. And not prepared to get into that topic tonight, because I have written about it before, and I would have to refresh my research on it. But yeah, I'm definitely I definitely know where you're coming from with that. But here's the thing. Let's say by some miracle the impeachment actually goes through the House, makes it to the Senate. What's going to happen? Nothing. It's going to die in the Senate. And if you have Republicans break rank, and some of them will, like probably like Mitt Romney would, and Lisa Murkowski would, and Susan Collins would, like those Republicans will probably break rank. They will not vote for an impeachment of Biden. Well, the Republicans have made another failure, right? Right now, like, you see all these, like, things that the Republicans are passing through the House that have no chance of making it through the Senate, okay? They passed, for instance, something about public schools, the parental rights act. I think it was. They passed. It was dead on arrival in the Senate. Senate was never voting for it. It was never getting through it. Republicans are trying to say all these victories in the House. They're just not. They're just never going to get through, right? Uniparty won't let him actually get removed from office, but they will allow an impeachment to appear nonpartisan. I think that they'll actually frame it as partisan, and they would be pretty correct about that. I think that one of the Republican strategies is actually just do nothing. If Republicans would just let Biden be Biden through his entire re-election campaign, I mean, he's going to sit in a basement probably. He's not going to go out much. He's going to make all kinds of gaffes when he goes out and does, speeches, and, if he debates, he's going to probably make all kinds of mistakes, and it's going to look like, remember the first debate from 2020 where it was Joe Biden and Trump yelling at each other? Like, it was hilarious, and I think Biden told Trump to shut up or something. It was like, it was ridiculous. Like, it's like, this is what we have. This is this is what we have. But the thing is that this is exactly what's going to happen if I think if Republicans just let Biden be Biden, people will realize, oh, this man is completely off his rocker. Like, he's frail, he's old, and not that it's bad being old. I mean, there's a lot, I know people that are older than Biden that are way more with it, but Biden is not with it, right? And when you look at somebody, there are differences between like an active, healthy 85-year-old and a frail, dying 85-year-old, right? And Biden personifies the frail, dying, 80-year-old. So he doesn't appear with it. I mean, I just remember that video of him falling off a bike, and he's just standing there. And somebody told me about it, and I remember. I was like, come on. Like, I know it's Biden, but come on. He didn't just fall standing there off a bike. He did. I saw it, and it's like, wow. I mean, this is just what we have to deal with. And if you let people see that, I think that's the best chance the Republicans have, is to let Biden kind of bury himself. I think the impeachment will just be more people saying Republicans are, ineffective. They try to do all these partisan things that aren't good for the country, and again, the default is to vote for Biden. So I don't know. That's my opinion. I think that's what the Republicans should do if they want to win this election. I'm not a Republican, so I will vote for certain Republicans, but not because I find them to be, or not because I find Republicans in general to be better. It's because I find more people on the Republican side to have more measured ideas. All right, let's talk about this. So we're going to kind of switch gears, and we're going to now we're going to attack the other side a little bit here. Melinda French Gates calls for women's parity in political leadership. Women make up just over half of the U.S. population, but only a quarter of federal lawmakers identify as female. Melinda French Gates is financing efforts to change the tide on these unacceptable statistics and get more women elected through her company, pivotal ventures. When our government looks like we look as a populace, they represent us, and they make then laws, and policies that we all believe in. And they make then laws. Okay. And maybe I'm reading that wrong. Or maybe it's supposed to be, and they then make laws and policies that we all believe. Maybe that's what it's supposed to be. And we're just not there yet, she told NPR's Michelle Martin. Women earned the federally protected right to vote more than a century ago in 1920, and yet in today's House of Representatives, there are more men named Mike than there are women chairing committees. There are barriers to women running for office, says Gates, a co-chair of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, an NPR sponsor, because of course they are. We need to stop sending women to a broken system, and we need to change the system. Now, I'm reading this article because this is what I wanted to get to. One of these barriers is childcare. Through Pivotal, Gates has supported Vote Mama, a group advocating for women to use funds they raised for their campaigns to help pay for childcare. A total of 26 states now have such measures in place, according to Gates. Okay, here's my question. You guys ready for the question? What does it take to make a child? I'll wait. From what I recall, it takes a man and a woman. Okay. So, most children have a mom and a dad, right? I mean, I don't know. It's just, I mean, I guess you could do it through, a test tube now, but, why are we helping, here's my question, why are we helping women pay for childcare? I want you to think about that. We touched on this subject a little bit last week. And here's the thing. The reason that we help women pay for childcare is because people like this hate women. Now, why do I have the confidence in saying that I do? Why do I have the confidence in saying that Melinda French Gates, who has all these, has this whole organization that helps, quote unquote, helps women and all this other stuff, why do I think that she doesn't like women? Well, because you have to have a view of women that they need your help. And men who also have children do not need your help. So therefore, you must look at women on a lower scale than men in order to think that women aren't capable of paying through childcare, and therefore need to divest some of their campaign funds into it. But men don't. Now, what they do is they mask this in a type of flowery language where they say, there are barriers to women running for office, says Gates, a coach. We need to stop sending women to a broken system, and we need to change the system. Well, wait a second. Why can't the women, just say, hey, hubby, I'm going to work. You watch the kid. Why can't they do that? I mean, apparently they're saying men do that, so why can't, or they're implying men do that. So why can't the women do that? It's amazing we can hear Silentcaster speaking from the ivory tower he lives in. Do I live in an ivory tower? I wish I did. Then I'd probably be rich, right? How you doing, Mog? Hey, Chewy. How you doing? Oy vey, here we go. This is what happens when you give women authority. I mean, I wouldn't say that, necessarily. I mean, the thing is that I'm not someone that thinks it's bad, that anybody has authority over another person. My thing is that I think that organizations like this take down women. Well, that was kind of my next point. It's always saying that, and of course, you have to remember, NPR revealed that she was a sponsor, right? So NPR is always going to give her a platform, and it's never going to be an unfavorable one. But, I would ask, why? Why do you want, Here's another thing that I always have to talk about, is that women actually have a lot of power over men. Like, I don't understand it. And you probably know why I don't understand it, right? You know why I don't understand it. But women have this power over men that make it so that, like, men will, traverse minefields for women. Like, men will completely change everything they do to make women happy. And most men don't ask for much in return, right? As long as, like, the woman's keeping them happy, like, they'll do whatever that takes to make a woman happy in general, right? And so women have a lot of power behind the scenes. And what this does is it just kind of says, women, you aren't good enough to do that behind the scenes. Like, we need you in Congress. We need you out there because only you are going to make laws that benefit women. Men won't do that because men are terrible, I guess. Why wouldn't men do that? So, anyway. Women, we know now from good research, govern differently, more collaboratively. And that's why I think we need to support organizations who are helping get women, help getting women and people of color, people of color apparently as well, into our congressional halls. Okay, so apparently we just say these kinds of things. We just say them. We now know from good research, which is what? They govern more collaboratively. Okay. Now, let me ask you, would they want, more Marjorie Taylor Greenes in office? Do they want more Lauren Boeberts in office? Do they want more, Uh, who's the Prime Minister of Italy? Do they want more of her in office? I bet you they don't. Remember, like, Italy's motto was, like, faith, family, and community or something? Like, faith, family, community. And they were saying that she's the return of Mussolini. If women ran things, there would not be any wars, except maybe one week a month. 1 week a month when all bets are off. When Aunt Flo comes to visit. That's why I trust Lindsey Graham. Women have no power over it. There you go. Lindsey Graham is the best senator. He's amazing. Today's role models for men are the likes of either Harry Styles, a homosexual, or Andrew Tate, who places his entire identity around the approval of women. There are no well-known male leaders who say, go be a man, and don't give a F about what women say. Turns out that's I'm thinking you mean that's actually what women want. Well, I don't think that women don't give an F about what women say. I think that talking to a lot of women, they want a man to give an F about what they say, but at the end of the day, they also want to be able to trust a man with their input and then, often trust them to make the decision. And that doesn't always, turn out to be what the woman wants, but if they feel, like, in most relationships, if they feel respected and appreciated, despite somebody being, disagreeing with them and making a decision not in their favor, that's what I would say, that not only what most women want, but what most people want is what I would say. Govern collaboratively is another way of saying democratically. Common democracy loss. Yeah, well, we all know what I think about democracy. It's a very flawed system. And unfortunately, we have a lot of people that vote in today's society that don't deserve to. Okay. We're going to talk about the Barbie movie a little bit. Now, I just kind of picked a random, and apparently it's by Piers Morgan. I picked a random right-wing kind of, quote-unquote right-wing type of negative review of the Barbie movie. We're going to read a little bit of it, but I have a bigger topic to talk about here, and it has more to do with the foundation of Hollywood rather than the Barbie movie itself. And the title of this article is, If I Made a Movie That Treated Women the Way Barbie Treats Men, Feminists Would Want Me Executed. Excuse me. What is the patriarchy? I bet most people reading this haven't a clue. Even I don't really understand it, and according to radical feminists, I'm supposed to be the very personification of what it supposedly represents. Yet it's a word that is said so relentlessly in the smash hit new Barbie... Oh my gosh. That it's worth knowing exactly what it means. The literal translation, derived from the ancient Greek word patriarches, is rule of the father, and denoted the reality at the time that men were the titular heads of most families and organizations. But in recent times, the concept of the patriarchy, has been hijacked and corrupted by feminazis to suggest that every aspect of life in society is dominated by powerful privileged males over subjugated underprivileged females. In short, men are evil oppressors, women are unimpeachably perfect victims, and anyone who dares to challenge this notion is a disgusting misogynist. Presumably, this article is going to go on to talk about why the Barbie movie is bad, why Piers Morgan doesn't like the Barbie movie, why you know, and believe me, I've seen, just on my YouTube feed, there are things Ben Shapiro I like about him, and there are things that I don't. For instance, one of the things that I don't is I think him and Jeremy were incredibly disingenuous during the Steven Crowder when they were in negotiations. Now, I'm not a fan of Steven Crowder either, but when I look at the two on that particular issue, I believe Steven Crowder was absolutely correct. He was saying that a lot of the big conservative types of media outlets are I'll say, well, they're entirely devoted to big tech and, YouTube and all that. And so as a result, Steven Crowder's contract that he was offered was able to be dwindled by the amount of advertisers that would remain to appear on his stream. Now, let me remind you, this was at a time when Steven Crowder had been demonetized from YouTube for a long time. And it had also been during a time where Steven Crowder was known to be at the end of his contract, and it was kind of known what his salary requirements were going to be. And so if they wanted to acquire this, they would have already had this information at hand. And so instead of that, what happened was Steven Crowder had said, hey, these structured contracts where you're basically beholden to the big tech organizations, they shouldn't be structured this way. And so what Ben and Jeremy came out and said was well, but actually we are a company and we need to make money, so we have to structure them this way. And what Steven Crowder was saying was, okay, but you are actually playing big tech's game by doing that, right? And so then they clutched their pearls when they learned that Steven Crowder, actually recorded their conversations, right? And so they said, oh, who does that to their best friend? I remember watching Ben Shapiro say this. Who does that to their best friend? Because I wanted to give both a chance. I wanted to listen to one argument and the other counter-argument. And I was like, well, Steven Crowder's been doing that for years. What are you talking about? Steven Crowder has been actually doing that for years. I don't watch him, and I know he does that. Why do you think that he wouldn't do that to you, especially in business? The only reason I even knew that Texas was a one-party state or a one-party consent state for recording was because of a skit that I watched with Steven Crowder. Why do you think that you are above that, Jeremy Warren? Anyway, but but when I look at my YouTube feed, I see and also Ben Shapiro destroys the Barbie movie for 45 minutes. And then, I think Candace Owens had a piece. And I think The Quartering and Vera After Dark and all these other people that I sometimes listen to. And here's what I'm going to say about this. All these people that are, quote-unquote right-wing or, whatever you want to call them, they are missing the point. And they're acting upset and annoyed that Hollywood, an organization or, an entire cabal of people that hate you, would put out a movie that says that they hate you. why not just not pay attention to it? Don't give them free market. I mean, you have to remember, the marketing for this movie was insane. When I actually looked up articles for this, like I said, I picked this one at random. Because there's lots of, like, quote-unquote right-wing articles that are bashing the Barbie movie. I just picked this one. And, like, when you do that, when you do that, you're just giving them more marketing. Like, and so when I sorry, I didn't finish my thought. So when I looked this up, the whole screen went pink. Like, they got Google to do that kind of marketing. Like, all I looked up was Barbie movie reviews. And the whole screen went pink, and it had all these little hearts and everything that came up. Like, that's their marketing. And so, let me just tell you, are you surprised that a movie that an industry that hates you would put out a movie that says they hate you? But there's an even bigger point than that, which is this. If we look at let me say this. Let me back up. One of the questions that I get asked sometimes, because I as you know, I've said this about a lot of things. I say, try to shop at places that don't hate you. You know, even if they're neutral or maybe they're not the perfect place. Like, there are different industries and places that you can get things, like soap. Instead of going to Unilever, go to, an independent. Instead of getting your, trying to think of one. Like, instead of going to Walmart all the time, try to go to a local market, And the reason I say these things, and I always say, don't buy from people that hate you, is the pushback I get on it is about, well, the pushback I get on it is always, why do you think that they hate you? And I'm going to answer this because it took me a little while to realize when I first knew that they hate you. But it happened a long time ago, and obviously, as somebody who is not into women, I had always sided with the other side on this. Or I had always sided with, what you would, again, quote unquote, call the right. Right? And so, this happened a long time ago, and a lot of you are going to know about, like, the gay wedding cake fiasco thing or whatever. When it was, like, I think it was, two lesbians that wanted a baker to bake a cake for their wedding, and the baker refused. And so they took it to court, and it got dragged out, and it got dragged out, and it got dragged out. And it was relatively recently settled, I think, but it started a long time ago. And I remember the arguments were always, like, oh, well, we can't allow hate. You can't discriminate against customers. That was the argument versus, the Christian that was like, okay, well, it's morally against my, my higher being, my God, and therefore I can't, do that. I can't do that in good faith. And so what I always thought was, what describes more hate? Somebody that says, I don't want to do that cake. I'm going to pass. I'm going to refuse your money. I'm going to refuse your money on a wedding cake because I don't want to cater that cake. So you're going to have to go to the next town, somewhere else, and get your cake. You're going to have to bake it yourself. You're going to have to do whatever. but I'm not going to do it for you. Is that more hate than I am going to use the power of the government to compel you to bake this cake? And if you don't, I'm going to have one or more of the following things happen. The government will put you out of business. The government will fine you. The government will close your shop, and or the government will jail you. Now, there's one that says you're going to have to. I look at those two contrasts, and I say, there's one that says, and keep in mind, this is a gay person telling you this. I'm gay, for those that don't know. And I look at those two things and I say, okay, if I was getting married, which I'm not, but if I was, and a baker said to me, I'm not going to bake that cake, I'd say, okay. I'd walk out. I'd just say, that's your power, or that is your choice to refuse my services. I wouldn't even be upset, but okay, some people would. That's their choice. But that's one thing. Or would I be so unreasonable to say, not only am I gonna put you out of business, but I'm going to bring a media circus around you and probably ruin your life forever. Which is fueled by more hate? The choice is obvious to me, and it has always been obvious. These are the same people that made the Barbie movie. They would rather tell you that by not seeing their movie, you are misogynistic, you are a, right-winger, extreme right, fascist, and you believe in patriarchy, and you're complicit and all this stuff. They would rather tell you that, and you're a review bomber, than say, what we made was propaganda. And so, that's how I know that these people hate you. I would rather spend my money at a place that doesn't hate me. That is my thought. I would rather give power through money to people that are at least neutral. And so when I tell you guys this stuff about shop where your dollar will actually, matter, that's not me telling you, go out and spend a bunch of money at a conservative coffee shop. That's me telling you, just make better choices as far as, make small choices. I'm not saying you can even avoid everything, but you can certainly avoid a lot of things. And there are a lot of places that will want your business. And actually, small businesses will work with you more often than, a business like Unilever, right? Who do you think runs Hollywood? China. Ben Shapiro is Barbie target audience. Yeah, pretty much, actually. It's probably just Ben Shapiro that's spending the billions of dollars going to see it over and over. A movie about hating the Ubermensch. Real brain teaser there. Who on earth really hates the Aryan legend Ken? Well, they certainly made him out to look pretty bad in the movie. I can't go in my local market, unlike Walmart. They have dress codes like no shirt, no pants. Have you seen people in Walmart? Like, I have been there where, like, people are, you know, not dressed very well. Well, so I'd rather they lash out at you while crying rape. Yeah. Can't you use the power of love instead? I heard it's a curious thing. Really? Where'd you hear that from? I know, Mog. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry you had to find out that way, but now you know, and you'll be okay. Oh boy. All right. Well, we're gonna change topics a little bit now. Farm workers. Oh wait. The news? Huey Lewis in the news? Okay. They put food on our tables but live in the shadows. This man is fighting to be seen. Alright, guys. You guys ready for this one? Oh, another NPR article. Can we just call it national propaganda? Like, can it just stand for that? Okay. Jose Martinez has lived and worked in the United States since he was 14 years old. Now 67, he drives around the Yakima Valley in Washington State checking on fellow workers. When it's hot, do you have a place to protect yourself from the sun and heat? He calls out to some workers on the side of an apple orchard on a Sunday, June morning. Just imagine this. This guy is driving around in a pickup truck. And he's like, hey! Hey, y'all! Do you have a place to protect yourself from the sun and the heat? In Washington! Washington! Okay, guys. Okay, calming down here. Calming down. Calming down. Just imagine. And what if they're just like, no? He's like, ooh, sorry to hear that. Sorry, guys. I'm sorry. I have to calm down. I have to calm down a little bit about this. Like I'm just like, could you just imagine? Like, what's he gonna do if they say no? Like, you want to sit in my truck? Has air conditioning. You can all sit in here for like 2 minutes. Martinez worked in agriculture across the fields of California and most recently Washington State. Irrigation, grapes, apples, mushrooms, dairies, and now cherries. He's done a little bit of everything. I love the fields because you're in the open air, he told NPR in his native Spanish, sitting on the lawn outside his home in Sunnyside, Washington. It's beautiful. I'm proud to do it, to be a farm worker. Why not? When people think of farm workers, often they think of migrant workers and labor organizers like Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta. Now they may add another name to those creating major changes in the farming workplace. Jose Martinez. No, I don't think they're going to. Over the past decade, Martinez has been central to 2 flagship lawsuits creating policy changes in the state, making Washington one of the leaders in providing overtime to farm workers and settling a civil rights case in favor of workers. And recently he has taken his fight to Washington, D.C., where he has pushed for an expansion of legal status and protections for farm workers. So I'm going to read most of this article because it's just hilarious. Like, this whole article is hilarious. Federally, farm workers are largely excluded from many federal workplace safety regulations. They don't have a right to overtime pay or to unionize, and children as young as 12 can legally work in the fields. As a result, some states like Washington have extended additional rights and regulations. Okay. They don't have a right to overtime pay or to unionize. I want you guys, we're going to come back to that one. We're going to come back to that. But I want you guys, we're going to come back to that one because that's just golden. That's just going to be golden later in the story. But here's the thing. Children as young as 12 can legally work in the fields. Now, the way that they framed this is bad. Right? Now, notice it doesn't say children as young as 12 are mandated to work in the fields. It doesn't say children as young as 12 are coerced to work in the fields. It's just, they can. Right? So a 12-year-old can say, hey, I'd like a job. And a farmer can say, okay, and give him one. Or her. I don't see the problem here. I don't see the problem with this. Why would it be bad? Like if a 12-year-old wants to go and work for a farmer picking crops, again, they could work for one day and leave. I mean, it's not like they're mandated to do this. But they frame it as like, look at. But, don't worry. The children as young as 12, no problem picking their gender. Actually, 12 is way too old. You should do it way sooner than that. As a result, some states, like Washington, have extended additional rights and regulations. And yeah, we're going to get to that, Mog. I know that that's part of it. President Biden came into office with the goal of expanding protections to farm workers, including providing a pathway to legal status, overtime pay, sick leave, and protection from heat exposure. But despite being the self-proclaimed pro-labor president, his administration has faced roadblocks such as stalled nominations and legislation in Congress and slow rulemaking to make big changes a reality. I don't know. I mean, the Democrats controlled everything from 2020 to 2022. They didn't do it. Washington is, which is, they're talking about Washington, the West Coast, totally blue states. But, Biden, it's roadblocks, like stalled nominations, those darn Republicans again. Those Republicans that don't know their feet from their butt. Because I try not to swear. You can replace that word with whatever you want. Those darn Republicans that don't know their feet from their butt, they just ruin everything, guys. Including the farm workers. The Washington workers' journey to becoming an activist began nearly 14 years ago. That's when Martinez began working at a dairy. At that dairy is when I started to see workplace violations and abuses from the foreman to the workers. Okay. Martinez recalled. And that's when I began to do something about the rights that we have as workers in the fields. So, Martinez is 67. He's been working since 14. And it wasn't until he was 53 that he decided... I don't know. There's a long time between the ages of 14 and 53. There's a lot of years in between them. And he just noticed these workplace violations. Like, the reason I like NPR so much is just because it's so transparent. Like, at least CNN or ABC, like, they try to hide the propaganda. Like, NPR is just like, nah, brah. Here it is. They don't even think about it. Martinez said that while working, he and his fellow farm workers didn't get lunch or other breaks. So he sought the help of Columbia Legal Services, a law firm in Washington that in part focuses on immigration issues. We began to fight, and that overtime was born within the state of Washington, he said. The lawsuit he filed argued that a failure to provide overtime pay violates state protections against discrimination. Against discrimination against farm workers, I'm guessing? In that dairy, you had to eat with a taco in one hand at work. He recalled. I don't know if I can make it. I don't know if I can make it through this. Just imagine milking a cow, like, with a taco in your hand. Oh my god. Oh my god. Okay. Alright. There were chemicals, rats. You had to eat and run among the cows. They said it was an 8-hour shift, but sometimes it was 12. And we were not paid overtime. Thanks, Behold, and you have a good night. Due to a Jim Crow era exemption in federal law, most farm workers in the U.S. do not have the right to overtime pay. Okay, so it is something that is an archaic rule, right? It's an archaic rule, and I'm not even someone that is in, like, federal rules. But it is kind of strange that farm workers wouldn't get overtime. You know, it's kind of a, to me, it's like an oversight, right? Like, again, not one for federal rules. Not one that says, like, it should be mandated, you know, whatever. But it is strange that this is an industry, which is a laborious industry, that would be exempt from overtime, as opposed to, you know, most other industries that are not. Due to a Jim Crow era exemption in federal law, most farm workers in the U.S. do not have the right to overtime pay. In the fall of 2020, the Washington Supreme Court ruled 5-4 that dairy workers should be entitled to overtime pay. Wow, I felt so emotional, Martinez said, remembering how he reacted to the court's decision. The Washington state legislature then created a law to provide overtime for all farm workers, a phased-in process that has already begun. By 2024, farmers will have to pay workers overtime after 40 hours. Other states, including California, Colorado, and New York, have passed their own laws in recent years requiring additional pay for people working on farms specifically. I wonder if there's farms in Colorado. Well, I guess maybe in the valleys or something. Martinez said not all workers have been happy with the deal. As an unintended consequence, farmers are hiring more workers to avoid paying overtime wages, resulting in lower wages overall for some longtime employees. While some advocates say they expected this to happen in some instances, Martinez told NPR he did not. How? How did you not expect this? How did you not expect farmers to be like, well, now I'm going to avoid the over... How? I just... Who didn't see the end of this train coming? Like, who didn't see the caboose of this train? Has this guy ever been to a fast food restaurant? Ever. Like, that's exactly what fast food restaurants do. There are a few different points of views he acknowledged, saying that some workers blame him for their now smaller paychecks. But why don't we work the same long hours and get paid better? Why don't they pay us better? Well, okay, here, I'm gonna explain business to you. Okay? So when you raise your prices, when you raise your cost of goods, right? And in this case, your production is your these are production workers because they're either producing the dairy or they're picking the crops or whatever, right? When you raise your production wages, your cost of goods raises significantly. And so what happens is there are three choices you have. The first one is to eat that, which means that your gross profit better be pretty darn high if you're going to eat the extra money that you have. The second, or the extra money that you have to pay out, meaning that you're going to get less gross profit, so your net profit is obviously going to go down as well because your overhead doesn't change, right? So that's number one. Number two is you charge your client more. Now, in the farming industry, you have, a lot of clients that are going to be larger companies where you have either pre-negotiated contracts where you're not going to be able to raise your prices very much at all because you're already in that contract, or you risk losing your contract because you have to go to another, you're going to lose your contract because they're going to find somebody else that does it. The third thing you can do is remain competitive. And so the way that you remain competitive is you just get more workers in. You need the workers, you need the crops, but you can't raise your margins, or you can't destroy your margins by changing your operations. So you do exactly what fast food restaurants do to keep their prices low, which is hire more people for less hours, right? And so in order to do that, that is the most attractive option, especially in an agriculture industry where, as they kind of mentioned earlier, there's not a lot of unionization, there's not a lot of, workers that are going to be able to kind of fight back. And you would rightfully be able to say, isn't that taking advantage of a bunch of disenfranchised people, right? Because we're going to find out, and probably most of you already know, but we're going to find out why these workers cannot unionize, right? I mean, it's pretty obvious why they can't unionize, but the whole thing is that you can't... This guy asking this question shows such a naive misunderstanding of business that you can't put any serious weight on what he's saying. the agriculture industry is very backward. They get away with it because you have to love the farmer, because they have to love the farmer. Well, you know, I mean, at the end of the day, pure power. What pure power means you understand presently. They are different from the oligarchies of the past, and that they know what they are doing. All the others, even those who resembled ourselves, were cowards and hypocrites. The ruling class. Well, of course. I mean, they want to build upon, they want to build upon the power they have. I mean, this is precisely why corporations like, and I'm not going to get it too much into this because it's a complete tangent, but that's precisely why corporations like BlackRock, Amazon, Google, all the big tech, they all have effectively pseudo-monopolies where they have the power over a bunch of goods and services, and they can terminate a lot of people's ability to live. And so a lot of people are scared of, kind of bucking the trend of these particular corporations and, people in power, because it's like, well, we have the power to turn off your income. We have the power to make your life miserable. We have the power to blacklist you, right? Because if you work for them, or, they are a patron of one of your businesses or something like that, they can, effectively control you. And so they always want to do that, so that way they have more people that are under their wing and will do them favors and will be afraid of them, right? Okay. Some farm workers want to get rid of the overtime law. Martinez sees it differently. He's going for bigger change, higher wages, so that farm workers don't feel they need to work 60 to 70 hours a week in harvest season to make enough to live on. Okay, so then why did you go with overtime? Why didn't you make that your hill to die on? I had faith that when I start something, I will finish it and it will be done, he said. I've never been afraid. The other thing, if you're going to say big picture, is you could always, use the narrative. Now, I'm not saying it's a true or false narrative, but you could always use the narrative that the fresh fruits and vegetables and things that, farming produces, which is pretty much most food, is more valuable than what it's being sold for today. And in that way, you start a trend that makes people pay more for that said thing. And as a result, that puts a heavier emphasis on workers, and then those workers are forced by the public to be seen differently, right? So people wouldn't mind paying, for instance, 4 times the price for a banana. It's still relatively inexpensive, but they would do it. They'd be more willing to do it because they would see the farm workers that did it, and they know that they're helping, that kind of a industry. Those people make more money, right? So, I don't know. This guy obviously is not seeing a bigger picture, but and then it just kind of goes into this. So, the reason that he is I'll address that in just a minute, but I just want to get through this article first because I have a little bit more to go through and I'm running out of time. So, but the reason that we're you're gonna see is that a lot of these people are what they call what this article is going to call undocumented, which is actually, just people that are not here legally. Okay. And the thing is like, obviously you can't unionize if you're not, here legally, if you're not collecting a legal paycheck. And that actually kind of reflects poorly on the farmer as well. But the farmer will do, pretty much what it takes to get the work in, right? I mean, a farmer wants to pay, any business owner wants to pay as little as possible for their cost of goods, especially if the cost of goods isn't going to affect the final price. And in this case, it probably wouldn't very much. It doesn't really matter if you pay someone $20 an hour to pick your fruit or $2 an hour to pick your fruit, but it does matter when you're trying to sell the fruit how much you can charge for it, right? So there is something that probably should be done in this industry. I just think it's going about it the wrong way. Because as you see, business owners are always going to try to just work around the new rules. And when you talk about Washington and, some of the especially the West Coast states like that, you have to go further. When you go to where the farms are, which is further east in the states, those are generally more conservative areas. And so those areas are always going to try to just get around the main line, right? They're just going to try to bypass effectively what the courts are saying and asking them to do, because they don't agree with the courts, and they don't, those are not the people that they would have put into power if they had a choice. Okay. If you want a picture of the future, imagine a boot stamping on a human face forever. Actually, I believe that it's just going to be AI soon that will be stamping out the human race entirely. Power is in tearing human minds to pieces and putting them together again in new shapes of your own choosing. Until the masses become conscious, they will never rebel. After they have rebelled, they become conscious. Do you see the issue here? Oh yeah, of course. I mean, the thing is like, most people don't want to think about it, and a lot of people can't, they don't want to speak up because they're, the people that do know are kind of, often cushy, right? For instance, if you work for Disney and you are, secretly a right-winger, not, I mean, what they would call a right-winger, which is anybody to the right of, like Karl Marx, then you are not going to really be allowed to speak up, or if you do, and you do it, publicly, and you get too loud, they're gonna fire you. They're gonna stamp you out. They're gonna say, "Oh, you're, bigot. You don't reflect company values. You need to leave," and that can destroy a lot of people. And for someone like me, I support myself, but that's all I support. Whereas for somebody like, a father of like 4 kids or a mother of 4 kids, well, that's a lot different, So there's a lot more on the line, and so a lot of people go into protect mode rather than fight mode. So, anyway. All right. We're going to touch on this a little bit. The Fed has raised interest rates again today. The Fed hikes interest rates by a quarter point and hints at another increase this year. The Federal Reserve raised its benchmark lending rate by a quarter point Wednesday, lifting interest rates to their highest level in 22 years. It's the 11th rate increase since the Fed began its inflation fight in March 2022, and comes just 1 month after the central bank hit pause in order to assess the state of the economy after the failures of 3 regional banks since the spring. Fed officials are estimating 1 more rate hike this year, according to their latest set of projections. Inflation's steady slowdown in recent months has been encouraging for American consumers and businesses, but officials reiterated in their post-meeting statement that inflation remains elevated and that the Fed remains highly attentive to inflation risks, suggesting that another rate hike remains on the table. In determining the extent of additional policy firming that may be appropriate to return inflation to 2% over time, the committee will take into account the cumulative tightening of monetary policy, the lags with which monetary policy affects economic activity and inflation, and economic and financial developments, the Fed statement said. So let's stop right there and we'll talk about this a little bit. So what I want you guys to take away from this, okay, is that if you are in debt right now, try to pay a little bit more and try to get yourself out of it. Because obviously what this means is, you kind of know what banks do to make money, right? They borrow money to make money. So they borrow money at whatever the interest rate is, and then they loan you that same money, but they loan it to you at a higher interest rate. So when you are doing, when you're doing that, banks will start taking less risks because it costs them more money when people default, right? So, back in, 2021, 2022, banks were loaning all kinds of people money, right? They were just like, oh, whatever, just take the money, because it's like they were almost being paid to borrow money. They were putting money into circulation because, it was just such a, there was all kinds of money available is what I'm trying to say. But now, if you default on your debt, and when you're talking about that large a sum of money, for a bank, when they borrow money and they pay interest on it, it's thousands, millions of dollars, right? So raising it, just a little bit causes them to pay a significant amount more money. And so they only want to take chances on, people that they are confident that will be able to pay them back. And so even for those people with, decent credit, they're going to start reviewing interest rates, but they're also going to start reviewing credit limits and, different types of things like that. And so if you're in debt and they lower your credit limit, right? Well, all of a sudden your credit gets worse because your debt ratio becomes larger. Not because of anything you did, but just because a bank says, we can take a better risk. We don't want to put this much on the line with this person, right? And again, not because of anything you did, but because of it costs them more, and they want to make sure that they have money available for, prospects that might be a little bit more safe. And so that's what I'm trying. One of the things I'm going to say is, if you are in debt, try to pay it off if you can, because it's going to be, a ride, or pay a little bit more, whatever you can do. It's going to be a little bit of a ride for you, as long as the Fed keeps raising interest rates, because they're they want to take money effectively and make it harder to get. And so just letting you know, that's gonna be the effect. Of course, it does help to raise the interest rate to help against inflation, but it's still inflation is still high. It's still, prices are overinflated right now for a lot of goods. So just again, try to pay off debt, because interest rate's going to get high. You're going to be more crunched, and then also you're going to have less credit limit in general available. And if you want to take out money right now, if you want to, This article is saying it's the highest it's been in 22 years. I didn't personally research that, but highest level in 22 years. It's probably not a great idea right now to take out money, or to borrow money, because you're going to have kind of a stubbornly high interest rate. So, again, try to pay it back. This is what's supposed to happen when the Fed raises interest rates. You're supposed to cut spending. And I would encourage you to do so. So we got the last ones are going to be 2 from Mog here. That Mog submitted. Excuse me. A Texas mom gave birth to a stillborn baby and her maternity leave was denied. Texas mother Elena Andres delivered a stillborn baby on May 6th at 37 weeks gestation. She was told her daughter no longer had a heartbeat after Andres experienced food poisoning symptoms. I mean, first of all, that's bigoted. We don't know if, that was, if she would have chosen to be her daughter. It might have been her son. It might have been a they, them. We don't know, right? After traumatic and intense labor and delivery, Andres gave birth to her stillborn baby, Maxine. It was very traumatic, Andres tells Today.com. Immediately when they held her up, you could just tell she was gray. She was gone. And then she was denied maternity leave after giving birth. It was revoked by her employer, the Austin Public Health Department. When Andres returned home from the hospital 2 days later, she informed her HR department that she'd be taking her maternity leave a little bit early since she was grieving the loss of her baby. They said, "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, but you don't qualify for leave anymore," Andres says. According to the Texas Tribune, Austin City employees are able to take 8 weeks of paid parental leave after the birth of a child or the replacement of a child for adoption or foster care, and up to an additional 4 weeks unpaid under the Federal Family and Medical Leave Act. Okay. So, again, I'm not one for, mandating or, federally, saying you have to, be able to, you have to give workers, leave or anything like that. I'm still not quite sure. I mean, mandating any company to do that, I don't think is right. So there's part of me that says, okay, this is, the libertarian part of me always says, well, that's their choice. They can do whatever. That being said, this is a very odd policy that the baby has to be born alive, and if it's not born alive, you can't take the leave. It's just, she had to go through the birth. She had to give birth. It was a traumatic experience. I fully believe that. I used to have a coworker that had a stillborn as well. And she said, she had to give birth. She had to go to the hospital, do the whole thing. And she, this woman, I'm not sure if she knew her baby was gone before it came out. But my coworker knew, a few days before, and she still had to go through all of it. And it was a horrible experience for her. And she said, she still has, nightmares about it. This was a coworker I worked with about 4 or 5 years ago. But, the whole thing is again, I'd be okay if the city didn't have a policy where they offered that. But since they do, it's very odd that they would have this in place where they're oh yeah, well, the child has to be alive. That's just very odd. Andre's HR representative told her that maternity leave only applies to those who give birth and care for a healthy newborn baby. Well, what if it's unhealthy? What if it's alive but unhealthy? anyway. I mean, the other thing is like, we're not hearing this from the HR representative. We're hearing this from this lady who might be misrepresenting what the person said. We don't know. I mean, that seems very insensitive to say. Even for me, and I'm not someone that, uses that word often, but that sounds very odd to say. In a statement to Today.com, a spokesperson for the city of Austin said that the loss of a child is an unthinkable tragedy for any parent, and that they will ensure any city employee experiencing such a devastating loss receives the support and time they need. So, yeah, the other thing is about Austin, it's like not like the rest of Texas. Like, Austin is very, very blue. If you want to talk about, like, in a so-called conservative state, Austin is not at all conservative. Like, they're very much on the opposite. I lived there for 2 years. They're very much on the opposite spectrum. It is a very bright blue spot in a red state. And so maybe the policy just wasn't written like it should be, or as it was intended. I can't imagine any malice here. Like, I don't think that Austin would have done this. And this just sounds like it's a, like I said, I lived in Austin for 2 years, and it's very much, very supportive of, these kinds of policies and that. So I see this being a mistake. Maybe somebody, was new or something and saw that, hey, they misread the policy, they misunderstood the policy, they tried to interpret it and they were wrong, or there was some kind of a misunderstanding, like, oh, you don't get the extra 4 weeks, but you get the 8 weeks paid leave. I don't know. I'm just saying, like, this sounds very odd. And I would be more interested in hearing it covered, more from a different perspective. But, that being said, I'm gonna probably just leave it there. Like I said, I'm not as... it kind of just talks a little bit more about how she was... she felt bad about what the HR representative said, and, the city of Austin kind of backtracked and said, that's not how we want to be seen, and blah, blah, blah. Like, again, I really think it was a mistake. I absolutely do not believe that the city of Austin would have said that to this woman. And again, I'm not even saying I agree with that kind of a policy. I'm just saying that I don't think in this particular case that was how it was supposed to be meant. Alright, and finally, Delta passengers, flight attendants fall ill awaiting takeoff in Las Vegas amid 114-degree temps. Well, I'm glad I wasn't on that flight. I'm going to Vegas, actually, in September. Nevada's triple-digit heat is to blame after multiple airline passengers became ill Monday while awaiting takeoff for hours on a scorching tarmac in Las Vegas. I actually heard about this story. I think, did somebody die? A flight from Harry Reid International Airport was scheduled to arrive at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport at 1 p.m. However, the plane never took off and sat on the tarmac for more than 3 hours, according to Fox News field producer Krista Garvin, who was aboard the flight. Temperatures in Las Vegas reached 114 degrees at 2:28 p.m. local time Monday. It was 2 degrees short of a daily record high and 3 degrees shy of the city's all-time record high. Garvin said she felt like a dog trapped inside a parked car on a hot summer day as she was waiting to take off. She also said there was no air conditioning on the plane. After about 2 hours, things began to go south for many passengers on board after the pilot instructed passengers to hit your call button if you're having a medical emergency. According to Garvin, the airline said passengers could board the plane, but it could possibly take days to get another flight to Atlanta. Why wouldn't... So, what? The sanitary crew came on board because some people had thrown up, Garvin said. I want to say one woman walked up the aisle. She was visibly ill. She couldn't even open her eyes. She was swaying back and forth. I mean, yeah, this is... What is this? Like, here's the thing. I would be screaming. Like, I don't know. My name is Kevin. I can be that Karen. It's very close to Karen. I would be screaming. I remember being at actually Las Vegas airport. I as most of you know, I was part of that whole Southwest debacle over Christmas last year. And I mean, I was in the airport all day. And I don't understand why everybody was just being like, just kind of dilly-dallying and being fine. And Garvin said the ill woman ended up sitting in the front of the plane as crew members put an oxygen mask on her. At least 5 people were seen being wheeled off the plane. According to Garvin, after 4 hours on the plane, stretchers were brought aboard on passengers as passengers were asked to disembark. Just imagine that. How terrifying. Like, they're bringing stretchers on board and they're like, okay, everybody back into the airport. Fox Business News reported passengers were later told that flight attendants had also fallen ill. Garvin said one flight attendant was wheeled out on a stretcher with an oxygen. Like, why would Delta do this? And leave them on the plane? Like, I would think after a certain period of time, like 10 minutes, without air conditioning, you'd be like, okay, we're getting off this plane, everybody. Like, we'll let you all reboard. Like, even as a passenger, I'd be like, okay, even if it's just 20 minutes, like, I wouldn't want to sit on a hot plane for like 20 minutes. Let alone hours, like these people did. Delta Airlines acknowledged that at least one passenger was treated by emergency personnel for heat-related problems. They also apologized for what they call a series of unfortunate events in Atlanta. And I haven't flown Delta in a very long time. And I'm flying Delta, and actually flying Delta out of Vegas in September. The only reason I'm doing that is because I have a credit that I have to use through Delta. But I'm not flying to Atlanta, I'm flying to Detroit, and then flying to Tampa. And then and then the flight was canceled. We're looking into circumstances that led to uncomfortable temperatures inside the cabin. Well, that's nice. At least they're looking into it, right? Oh, well, my friends, we have reached the end of the show. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. I appreciate it. You guys are awesome. We will be back. Sunday. I don't see any problem with this Sunday. Like I said, unfortunately, I was really stuffed up, had a terrible cold. I still have a pretty bad cold, but I was like, okay, I'm gonna be able to get through it tonight, because I'm on the back end of it, so I'm coming out of it and starting to be a little bit better. So we'll be back Sunday. We'll have some more to talk about then. I'm going to go ahead and send you all to Edgar. I don't get a chance to raid him very often because he only streams on weekdays, and I usually stream on Sundays. Hopefully we get to do some other content pretty soon. I'm trying to arrange maybe a gaming content, like with a charity, some kind of a stream like that, and you guys we can have some good old days, like doing some Code Veronica and some other speed runs, and maybe raising some money for a good cause. I'm gonna try to arrange with a few other streamers, maybe Starlight, maybe Edgar, maybe a few others. So, you guys, thank you so much for joining the show. We will be back on Sunday and back to our original time. Thank you so much for watching this midweek show, and I will see you all next time. Take care and have a great